Mark, thanks so much to you and to the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. I always enjoy these meditations, and I have to say, too, that I learned so much just from your announcements, the way you settle and ground the practice in your remarks beforehand. It's incredibly helpful to me and a contemplative practice in its own right, and I really appreciate it. And I want to welcome all of you today. Part of the way Mark has grounded where we find ourselves is a challenging but also an inspirational and hopeful time. Challenging because we have events in our own country that are stimulating, frightening, interesting, heightening of anxiety. We continue to live with the anxiety of October 7th and its aftermath, our care for the wounded and missing, the bereaved families. But we also find ourselves moving toward the end of the month of Av and toward the beginning of the month of Elul, when we come into maximal opportunity for close contact with the divine, with the sacred, with each other, and with the highest aspects of ourselves. And it's how to approach the idea of self at this time of year that I'd be interested in focusing on with you in today's meditation. In a moment, I'll ask Harry to post the brief study sheet I've created so that we can think together about some ideas about notions of sight and insight, of seeing out into the world and seeing inside our innermost selves, and the playing with and exploring the notion that our self is really a lens, or sometimes a filter through which images and experience go back and forth through the outer universe and the universe that exists within us. If we can sit with this in a calm, peaceful, and non-judgmental way, it can really change our experience of ourselves and the points of friction between ourselves and the wider world. We'll then do a brief meditation, which will have some guided components to it. And as always, if you are so inclined and want to stick around afterwards, I'll try to address as many comments and questions as you may have. So with that, I think we'll launch in. Harry, if you could pull up the source sheet. There's also a link to it in the chat. This week's Torah portion is Re'eh in the book of Deuteronomy, begins in chapter 11, verse 26, and goes to chapter 16, verse 17. As you may know, we're in the midst of Moses' long peroration, his long summative teaching, and expounding of the laws and experiences that have been bestowed upon Israel in the desert. And there's a lot of difficult material in this Torah portion in terms of smashing idols, destroying towns that have anything to do with idol worship, laws about what can and can't be eaten, what to do with the blood of the animal. But as is often the case, there's a rich lesson for us in just the first word and the very name of this Torah portion, which is Re'eh, see. The first verse of the Torah portion reads, Re'eh, anochi noten lefanechem hayom bracha uklala. See, I set before you this day, today, blessing and curse. There are a couple of interesting aspects grammatically about this very first sentence of this Torah portion. One is that Re'eh, see, the command to see, is singular. But then it says, Anochi noten lefanechem, I put before you, plural. And it says today, it's happening today. Blessing and curse are being set before you today. So what's interesting about this? First of all, the word re'eh is singular. So all of us have, to varying extents, even if we are physically blind, abilities of sight and insight. And we're being called upon to activate that faculty. Second, the word anochi, the more formal word for the first person singular, really talks, as we'll see in the next teaching on the sheet, about anochiut. You have to approach We have no choice but to approach the world, primarily, initially, as individuals. And yet, it is put before all of us. Lefanechem is plural. And I think what this suggests, for the purposes of our meditation today, we can ask it to suggest that everything we do is not only from us, for us, and about us, it is all set in the context of the community and the vibrant living world from moment to moment. And when is this true? It's true hayom, today. But every day is today. And every day is an opportunity to open your anochiyut, your I-ness, to the plurality in which you exist. In other words, and that is the blessing and the curse of being a human being, is to be aware that you live only within your own body and consciousness, but that you are never alone. That is the blessing. And the curse can be when you feel alone, when you feel isolated. Today, right now, I'm asking for us to consider this verse as a way to radically reposition ourselves with respect to our individuality, our selfness, our I-ness, what impinges upon us, what gives us hope. Everything that we experience is in the vast oceanic experience of life writ large. And that is the blessing. The curse, which we will seek to avoid today, is to feel that everything happens to us alone, that we are trapped in a mortal body, and that nobody can share our experience. Today, we're going to share experience and try to see the opportunity of experiencing the I as a filter, as a scrim that shares with the world and receives from the world in a way that is healing and positive. This next teaching is from the Ma'or Vashemesh, a rabbi known, as is often the case, a Hasidic rabbi known by the name of his most famous work. His given name was Kalonymus Kalman Epstein, and he was a mid-18th to early 19th century Hasidic rabbi in Poland. He says, "See, Anochi, I, set before you today a blessing and a curse. Anochi, I. The importance of a person in her own eyes can be both a blessing and a curse. The verse indicates that Anochi stands between God and yourselves. When a person thinks of herself as a somebody, this could be a mask that separates between her and the Holy Blessed One, and this is a curse. But selfhood can also be a blessing. Sometimes the evil inclination tells a person, how can you dare to pray before the Holy Blessed One when you're a worm and not a person? A great example of chronically low self-esteem. Let's keep scrolling, Harry. Then she must fortify her heart to enter the palace. Is there more? Is that the end of the sheet? Ah. Do we have the second page of this? There it is. Before the king, then Anochi, selfhood or ego, is for a blessing. Every day is a new opportunity for choice. This is the Sfat Emet. So this is sort of what I've been talking about at the beginning. Finally, before we meditate, I want to tie in an idea from later in this Torah portion that is one of the hallmark phrases of the social justice, of the tikkun imperative and impetus in Judaism. There shall be no needy among you, since Adonai your God will bless you in the land that your God is giving you as a hereditary portion. But if you read the Hebrew, it says, Efes ki lo yihyeh becha evyon. One way we can interpret this is that there will be no neediness within you. The radical idea that everything that you need to possess to experience the fullness of your anochiyut, in the best sense in this world, is already within you. This is a lot to throw at you, but the basic idea with which we'll plunge now into our meditation is this. First, let's assume the posture that we can all best assume, and the disposition to enter into contemplation. For me, this means sitting with feet on the floor, spine erect but not rigid, shoulders relaxed and balanced, neck lengthened just a little bit more than we ordinarily would, eyes closed or lightly open. And delving for a moment into the fullness of your anachiyut by breathing deeply and evenly, and centering your consciousness in the middle of your torso, right at the base, the bottom of the lungs, where the air that is inhaled most deeply travels to. As you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, let the muscles that hold your tension relax, beginning with the head, neck, and the face, where we hold lots of tension as we present our various masks for the world. Thoughts come and go. That's fine. Let them come. Let them go. Dwell for a few minutes in your physical anochiyut, your selfness, your physical apparatus, with all its beauty and all its peril that has been given to you for this life. For the last few minutes of this meditation, know that we are moving in our orbit toward the closest contact with the essence of our Jewishness. And we must bring our fullest anochiyut to this. This is the blessing of anochiyut. And that blessing is witness consciousness. That the basic, most fundamental I is the one who witnesses and sees life, not the one who worries and plans and executes. For the last few minutes, as you breathe, simply dwell in the fullness of your physical and spiritual I-ness, the fullness of being alive. Blessing and curse are set before us today, in every moment. Let us conclude this meditation by having you silently give a blessing to your anochi, to your I-ness. As you breathe As you begin to lift out of this meditation, bless your inner witness, your innermost self, with the courage, fortitude, patience, and love to both give and receive, to self and other. And as we conclude these blessings to ourselves, we will conclude this meditation.
So much, David. A beautiful teaching and practice. And friends, we seal that. We seal it as we do each day, offering those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom, join in the mourner's cottage to do so. You can put the name or names of those you're honoring today. We're of course honoring the memory of Rabbi David Wolf Blank, in whose memory today's practice has been sponsored by Judith Stoloff. Feel free to add other names. If you're not reciting Kaddish, opportunity to be present for those who are, offering your compassionate support. Thanks to Harry Goboa, who's holding our text space today. Harry, thanks for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. And if you're joining me, please rise in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalmad, Achivute, Yamlich Malchute, Chayechon, Mechon, Chaye Techol Beit Israel, Bagala Bisman Kariv, Amen. Rabba Mevarach, Olam Mame Amaya, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ar, Yitroman, Yitnaseh, Hadar, Yitaleb, Yitalal, Shemed, Yitzhak, La'ela, Mikol Birchata B'Shirata, Ushbechata Nechamata, Amiram B'Alma, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemayim, V'chaim Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael, Amen. Oseh Shalom Yeramav, V'yaseh Shalom, Inu V'Yakol Yisrael, Yakol Yoshvei Tevel, Amen. Friends, thanks so much. Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. And we thank Judith Stoloff for sponsoring our practice today in memory of her teacher, Rabbi David Wolf Blank. Thanks to Harry Gombo for holding our space. And thanks to our teacher today, David Gottlieb. Amy spoke earlier, called at Spertus College, professor at Spertus Institute in Chicago, professor of Jewish Studies. And I will put, I have it, let's see. Oh, yes, here it is. For those who are interested, highly recommend David's podcast, which is called Self-Control Through Torah. It's a weekly podcast based on the weekly Parsha. It has a brand new one episode today on truth in this week's Parsha, Re'eh. So put the link in there for those who are interested. If you're leaving us now, we hope you'll join us tomorrow. Zach Newman of Hamakom will join us from the UK to help us sit into Shabbat together for Shabbat Re'eh. And if we won't see you tomorrow, I want to wish you an early Shabbat Shalom. We hope to see you on Monday. Actually, not on Monday, next week, of course. In honor of Labor Day, we will not be meeting, but we will meet Tuesday through Friday next week, just to make a note of that. So David, I'm going to bring you in. And if you have a question for David that you'd like to put, please put in the chat. Preface it by writing question in caps. We'll try to keep an eye on that so we can respond to it. David, that was just beautiful. And I had to laugh a little bit to myself because when you got on earlier before people came in, I was joking. We were kind of joking about the ego. And I pulled up that, I guess classic joke at this point. Look who thinks they're nobody, So it was like a perfect segue to this theme today of I-ness, of anochi. And I just love to go a little bit deeper into that. Because for me, it can be, I think for me, it's an, there's a word apprehensible. You can apprehend. This is a concept that I feel like I apprehend in practice, in the sense that in practice, I can become aware of my mind constructing myself, my persona, right? The internal persona, the one I make up for myself, and the one I want to, I want to project out into the world. And I can mistake, basically the upshot, I think, of your teaching was that that self that we're constructing can be a mask, right? It can be a block between us and the deeper source of our being. Um, uh, on the other hand, as the text pointed out today, if we puff ourselves up or exaggerate ourselves, if we are too empty, if we have too little sense of self, that sense of self can actually help us pump ourselves up. I mean, this is really the meat of anava, balanced sense of self, right? But I'm interested in the spiritual aspect of it, and I want to bring in an awareness that I got from I can't remember the teacher, but the first word of the Ten Commandments is this word, Anochi. I am Yotevave, your God. And then at the burning bush, you've got Moses, who is the paradigm of that quality of humility, who starts off at the burning bush protesting about this assignment by saying, Mi Anochi, who am I to do this? And I always love that. It's almost as if at the Ten Commandments, God finally answers him and says, "You wanted to know who me Anochi, who Anochi is? I am Anochi, and also you are Anochi." So, to cut to the chase, my understanding of it, I'm curious to hear your sense, is in practice when I notice myself creating Mark Margolius in my mind, I can catch myself and say, "Oh, you're making up a self here." Um, but am I really making up that self? Or is there something deeper that is leading me to construct that self that is actually unknowable, but like the wave that is arising out of the ocean? So that, there's kind of a capital S self and the small s self. And myself is just a reflection of that universal self. And all selves are also part of that, which helps myself from not getting too big for its britches.
Thank
That's
you.
kind of my reflecting back what I heard the teaching be.
No, this is beautiful, and I'm so grateful that you brought in those examples from Torah about what Anochi is and could be. I saw some questions in the chat asking, well, how am I supposed to stop worrying, planning, executing? Is that the me? And if it's not, then what is? I mean, these are questions you have to sit with, right? Me Anochi is an existential question. Who am I? What is the I? What the meditation can lead you toward, if you do it over time, is to understand that there is a sort of fluid, ever-changing interface between the self that plans and executes and worries. We'll never get rid of that. It's not a bad thing. It's an adaptive trait, right? We wouldn't have survived as a species without it. It's very useful. But the fluid interface between that and the witness consciousness, what I describe as the essential inner self that sees experience prior to, Mark, as you were talking about, prior to the constructing of the self, that begins the minute we wake up and have consciousness and doesn't even entirely fade when we're asleep, because the dreams that can arise from a multitude of influences, including the interface between the witness consciousness, experience, and the self. So our Western idea of the self is the one who plans, worries, executes, has a face that we put forward into the world. But the Jewish
Is that the sight that you're talking about? That's the sight in terms of calling
sight,
the sight and
right,
insight.
right. And the insight is really the ability to see the blessing and curse of Anochiut, to see
Mm.
the permeable boundary and barrier between the witness consciousness and the outer self. The more you can experience witness consciousness, the more you will be able to live with worry, pain, anxiety, planning, the tasks of everyday life as something that simply is. It doesn't help you become superwoman or superman, but it helps you understand that the deepest part of yourself, and the Anochi of Anochiut, is not the planner. It's the interface between the planner and the innermost self that is your consciousness of being a human being alive in the world.
So can you say the second part again? Just what you just said. The second part.
It's the interface between the planner and the consciousness of that, and the interface between that planning person and that innermost consciousness that you are a human being alive in the world, and that you will not always be alive in the world. And so that the Hayom of today is the moment-to-moment gift that the Anochi can provide you. The curse is the anxiety that can provide you.
Yeah. I mean, just the unpacking of that verse at the beginning of the Parsha, Diana, that was enough right there.
Right.
Just that Hasidic reading of it as, see, let me see if I can, how would you punctuate it in English?
See,
before you today, I set the I,
Right.
It's not I set before you, but I set the I before you.
Exactly right.
Hayom. And his blessing occurs. Like it's a beautiful,
Right. And
very powerful teaching.
And when you do that, we go to the last verse that I shared. If you do this, there will be no neediness within you. It won't always be the case. You can't, I'm not trying to encourage you to try to become a guru on a mountaintop. We always lose this. It's Ratzo V'Shov. We're always coming and going between the poles. But when you reach this realization, there is no poverty within you from the Anochi.
Right. I want to tie this in so that those kind of two ideas of the self, that second one being the sort of transcendent consciousness, right? So there's a question from D, others might share. What if we start to feel that we ultimately really don't have any choice? It just seems like everything's unfolding beyond our control. And but it's always getting worse. We can't do anything about it. That seems dangerous, but it also seems true more and more. So I want to lift up the possibility that transcendent witnessing self that says, as you said, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm finite. Is one part of the equation that is reality, and it is terrifying. It can be terrifying. So I want to how to address that, because that's articulating the sense of I don't want to go there, which is I think partly or maybe mostly why we avoid that, because it's scary, sad, depressing, upsetting.
It can also be liberating in a way, and I think the Parsha, when it goes to part of the dual view of what the self is, to release the pressure and anxiety of feeling like I can't do anything. When this Parsha says, there shall be no needy among you, what it's really saying is you can absolutely make a difference, and it is incumbent upon you to make a difference. As the Talmudic dictum says, it is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, neither are you free to desist from it. So the freedom granted by knowing our finite abilities and our finite influence is to know that even in the smallest of ways, the way a butterfly's wings can initiate a hurricane, we can institute massive change. We do not have to be a world savior or a messianic figure to do it. We do it already every day.
I wonder, David, I'm thinking about the terms immanent and transcendent. I use the word transcendent for that second aspect. And you pointed out that planning self, the ego, whatever, the one that's in this world and planning and worrying, etc. And as you just pointed out, as empowered in some ways. Well, you can see divinity, and it's not like one is kind of the God perspective and the other is the human perspective. They're both God perspectives, but if we use terms like immanence, like the indwelling God here in this world versus the God that dwells, a deeper or broader or wider or beyond in some way, um, that instills a sense of awe. I mean, it's interesting because I was saying that they can be scary, but in the
Mhm.
sense of yirah, of a Hebrew word that can be translated as fear, but could also connote reverence or awe or wonder, right?
Right. And it
It sounds like
shares,
that's what you're. Sorry,
yes, exactly. No,
and go yeah, go ahead,
and it
go ahead.
shares the root
Right,
with the word for sight, right? The
right.
shorish of those two words, the trilateral root of those two words is the same.
Mm,
So
mm.
sight causes awe, right? It is the awe that we're alive. And it's interesting that you mentioned the immanent and the transcendent. When I was thinking about today's meditation, I was thinking about Emerson and his idea of transcendence, which means moving beyond our senses. To him, transcendence is uh, you get into spiritual experience through free will and intuition. And this to me is a move from uh, feeling trapped in ourselves to being freed from the most constricted nature of ourselves. That is transcendence to him. We use our imagination and our will to move ourselves into awe. And to do that move, you have to have sight and insight. The reason I called the sheet sight and insight was because of its close relationship to the faculty of awe. And Linda says, in the chat, I'm doing laundry today. Even this is an occasion for awe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Jack Kornfield who wrote a wonderful book about
Yeah,
the the transcendent in the mundane, and the title of the book was After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. That's life in Anochiyut.
good final word. We'll leave it there for now. Beautiful teaching, really a beautiful practice, and just really always a pleasure to be with you, David. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing wisdom and sharing your Torah today and sharing your presence. And also, thank you so much for your very kind words at the beginning, which I appreciated very much. Everyone, good to be with you. As always, Harry, thanks for holding us together. And we hope to see everyone tomorrow to practice with Zach Newman and move into Shabbat together. Be well, everyone. Many blessings.